Hello, Hitchhikers. Welcome aboard what we're calling the Neuro Symbolic Starship NSS Rainbird. And joining us today is Ben Taylor, who's our CTO and co-founder. He's going to take us to Planet Process. Ben, could we start with you and tell us a little bit about yourself and how Rainbird came about?
Sure thing. Thanks, Abu. And hey, everybody, it's a real pleasure to be here. And thank you all for joining to listen to us talk on this for the next half hour or so. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Ben. I am CTO and one of the co-founders at Rainbird. And look, we really started Rainbird 10 years ago with a hypothesis. That hypothesis was that, the world really needs AI that it can trust. We started Rainbird as a symbolic AI platform, which was really about taking all of the nuance and ambiguity that exists in the way that human experts go about making decisions and building a platform that would allow human experts to encode their knowledge and expertise into symbolic models, which you can then connect to data to go and ask questions of. And this was really important because symbolic models allow you to have a level of explainability that is hard to reach with other forms of AI. So that's really where Rainbird came from. It's all about building these models of human expertise, really. But now, of course, we're reaching forwards into this new neuro-symbolic future, which is really the direction of travel.
That's an interesting phase, neuro-symbolic. James mentioned in the last webinar. Could you expand a bit on that for our viewers?
Absolutely, and you're going to hear this term a lot more. I think it's really I think it is the direction of travel and where the future that we and I think a lot of other people would agree the future of AI over the next few years really sits. This is a big field and there's quite a lot to cover here. So it's actually going to be the subject of our next webinar. So if you're interested in kind of deep diving into neurosymbolic AI and understanding what that really means from an author's perspective, but also a consumer's perspective, and what it might mean for your business, then do keep an eye out for our next webinar, because that's going to be really, really interesting and where we're going to dive deep on this. But as I say, it's a technology which I think really you can think of as a bit like squaring a seemingly intractable circle. We have these two different kinds of technologies in AI. We have symbolic AI, which is really models like where Rainbird started. Symbolic AI is all about building structured models, typically of expertise, albeit with all the nuance and ambiguity of the way that people go about making decisions, such that you can then go and query and reason over those bodies of expertise. And really, that's about starting from human priors and has the great benefit that every decision that you reach from a symbolic AI platform comes with kind of baked in transparency and traceability and explainability. Really, really great, particularly in regulated domains. But symbolic AI models have to be explicitly encoded and built by human experts, which can take time. So, of course, on the other side of the coin, there is machine learning. And machine learning presents this great promise of not needing to explicitly encode the world, because we're able to learn from historic data. And machine learning brings with it the ability to go and drive some really amazing insights and predictions from data. But we would argue that prediction is not judgment. So neurosymbolic AI is effectively the bridge that brings these two worlds, these two sides together, these two different kinds of technologies together to deliver transparent but data-driven reasoning. And, for anybody who is using these kinds of technologies, particularly neurosymbolic technology, this is going to be an absolute superpower, and it's really very exciting. I'm not going to go into a whole load of detail on how this works, but I think it might be interesting just at a high level, maybe show you a little bit of how we see these two different worlds coming together, and what that means kind of alongside other technologies in the market. We will go into this in more detail in the next webinar, but in Rainbird really centers around these knowledge models, which are composite AI models that describe areas of human expertise in a structured way that allows our very powerful symbolic reasoning engine to go and reason over alongside data to reach decisions. Fully explainable, fully transparent decisions that you can actually go and take action on. Now, alongside this, we have a language engine which allows you to build those models, not just as a human expert starting from scratch, but also from natural language inputs. Say you've got process documentation or descriptions of your world, you can give those to the engine and it will produce these models for you, which can then be further refined by human experts. But it also allows you to interact with the reasoning engine in natural language. So you can talk to these things about your world. You can present data which isn't necessarily explicitly mappable to these structured models that sit in the middle. And then alongside that, we are under development is the new Rainbird neural engine, which allows you to actually learn and refine these structured models that sit in the middle of everything we do, but from data, whether that's historic data or real-time data, and to be able to surface recommendations to the human expert for how you might want to modify or manage your models that you've built. So it's really very, very powerful and very exciting, and we'll go into this process in a lot more detail next time. One of the things I think is quite interesting, though, is to look at why now is an exciting time for these technologies. I think most people are starting to recognize that artificial intelligence is actually a very broad term. This is a broad church, a collection of lots of different technologies that all fall into the category of artificial intelligence. And I'm sure everybody on this call will recognize a Gartner hype cycle. This is the 2023 Gartner hype cycle for artificial intelligence. It will be no surprise to anybody here that generative AI is sitting right at the top of the peak of inflated expectations. I think there's quite a bit of debate amongst experts in the market more generally about whether or not generative AI really is at the peak of inflated expectations. But I think we can all understand the hype that exists around Gen AI. One of the things, though, that I'd like to draw your attention to is over on the left-hand side here, where you can see decision intelligence and neurosymbolic AI coming up the curve. And this is really important because, well, as Gartner themselves say, it is technologies like decision intelligence, of which Rainbird is a decision intelligence platform powered by neurosymbolic AI. It's technologies like decision intelligence, neurosymbolic AI, foundational models, knowledge graphs, these sorts of things that are going to allow us to unleash all of those inflated expectations of generative AI and actually bring them out into real practical use. So the fact that we're seeing these technologies move up the side of the slope here, I think is very interesting and gives you perhaps a little bit of a sense of the direction of travel and why this is particularly exciting for us. But as I say, we'll go into this in more detail in the next webinar. So keep an eye out for that if you want to dive more into neurosymbolic AI.
So I just want to check one thing, because it says over here, in the triangle, it's 10 years in the future, neurosymbolic, but you're going to show us something in 2 months' time. I think September is where we're planning our next webinar.
Oh, yeah. So I think the really interesting thing to think about, particularly neurosymbolic AI is the coming together of different disciplines that are very advanced, very mature, and very well understood. Look, Rainbird is a 10-year-old symbolic AI technology, which is in broad application in lots of very large enterprise use cases right now. You can get value from these tools right now. You don't have to wait for this whole 10-year hype cycle to see its way through.
I look forward to the next one then.
Oh yeah.
So I think we're almost close to Planet Process. As we head there, could you tell us a little bit about what it's like on Planet Process and
All right.
where things are? So
let's do that. Let's talk about Planet Process. So just very briefly, first of all, so if you didn't come to the previous webinar, or maybe you're not familiar with this analogy, this is quite a nice way of describing kind of the two different sides to the way a lot of people see automation. It's almost like there are people living on two different planets. You have Planet Process and you have Planet Data. So, of course, Planet Data are kind of the folks who have been very focused on the science of machine learning, building predictive algorithms from largely often historical data. They're very motivated by kind of the superpower of insights and predictions, not perhaps so much on automation. And as I said earlier, we would argue that prediction is not judgment, and very often it takes a human expert to turn that predictive power into judgment that you can actually go and take action on. So we'll talk more about Planet Data in a later webinar. Today we're on Planet Process. So folks over on Planet Process, well, these are people who tend to be very focused on efficiency, A lot of this is about using tools like BPM, robotic process automation, more recently kind of the intelligent automation stack. And a lot of that is about taking away a lot of the kind of heavy lifting of rote, repetitive office-based tasks. That's where a lot of the kind of low-hanging fruit for a lot of these technologies really has been. So these are perhaps, sorry, go on.
Digital transformation, those kind of things. That's what we're primarily
Absolutely,
talking about, that kind of thing. So
yeah, but not generally kind of machine learning so much. And this is focused on reducing human effort, reducing human error. It's focused on maybe cost reduction, or maybe liberating people to go and focus on higher value tasks. And until just recently, if you wanted to do something more complex on Planet Process, you had to maybe go and build complicated branching decision logic. I'll talk a bit more about that in just a second. Or maybe you're deferring to human experts somewhere along the way. Or maybe you're trying to use machine learned predictions and still having to bring a human in to turn that into a judgment that you can safely go and action at the other end. So Planet Process is about kind of the set of technologies which tend to be quite linear. So this is sort of workflow technology very often, maybe robotic process automation tools, lots of linear rules engines, decision trees, branching or conditional logic, if this then that kind of rules. Of course, you've got process mining tools that can help us to surface those processes that will benefit most from automation and to enable us to accelerate the process of building automations around them. But a lot of that kind of, particularly in the kind of decisioning space, particularly kind of in the rules engines, a lot of those kind of linear engines can automate simple decisions, but more complex decisions are very difficult to go and automate. Those of you who are RPA folks on this call will probably recognize when I say, when we spent time with clients who have invested heavily in robotic process automation and then try to build more complex models of human decisioning, end up with this kind of spaghetti mess of branching decision logic, which can be extremely difficult and very cumbersome to go and maintain, very difficult to make changes to, and very, very hard to go and talk to your subject matter experts and demonstrate that it's actually encoded what you think it's encoded. And of course doesn't deal with all of the kind of nuance and ambiguity and fuzziness that there is about the way we as humans go about making real decisions in the real world. So there's this kind of gap between linear processes and this need to go and automate more complex human decisioning. There's a really nice, and I'm just going to bring it up, there's a really nice chart. This again comes from a piece of research from Gartner, which talks about this big untapped field of decisioning, which a lot of organizations have yet to go and really leverage. Chart's nice and simple, really. You can imagine you've got data along one axis where you go from fixed data, the sorts of things that are very easy for RPA tool to go and consume because it's well defined, it's clean, it's well understood, all the way up to the really fuzzy and incomplete data that we as humans might go and reason about when we're making decisions that we want to take action on in the real world. And the same is also true for our algorithms. A lot of algorithms that we might build linear process flows over are well defined. They're things that we can write down, that we can understand the step-by-step process that we need to go through. But of course, that's not the totality of the way that we actually go and make decisions in our organizations every single day. And so machine learning kind of comes and fills some of the gap that sits a little bit above that. And by machine learning, I would also include generative AI, large language models, and the like. But one of the things that Gartner's research has shown is that actually the vast majority of decisions that are made in organizations sit in this big field that sits outside of what can be readily reached by either of those technologies alone. And it's only through scaling and augmenting human expertise that you can go and reach this big untapped field that sits over there. And that's where neurosymbolic tools like Rainbird really allow you to go and tap into that big space. You can think of it, if you're a process person or you're an RPA developer, you can think of it a bit like, what if you were able to take your organization's best subject matter expert on a particular kind of decision and turn them into an API which you can drop into your process and ask questions of along the way? Wouldn't that be a superpower? And that is really allowing you to get into this big untapped field, but critically with complete trust and transparency in that decision. I'm going to just talk very, very briefly about trust, because I said at the start that our hypothesis when we started Rainbird 10 years ago was that the world needs AI that you can trust. And the real reason for that is that we believe trust in AI matters because trust promotes adoption. People will only adopt technology that they can understand, and they can only understand technology that can explain itself, that has auditability, has the ability for you to be able to look at and understand the basis on which a decision has been made. And that's even more critical today as the regulatory landscape is evolving, as more regulation comes to bear about the way that you are using AI in your organization, particularly when those decisions have an impact on people's lives. It's very important that you're able to explain why Rainbird's made a particular decision, why whatever application you're using has made a particular decision. Now, Rainbird does this by combining, as I described with Neurosymbolic AI, really combining the statistical power of machine learning with all of the explainability and logical reasoning of symbolic AI.
That's very interesting. So, Ben, I think for our viewers, it would be good to maybe get a small peek into how Rainbird AI works. Would that be something you could do for us?
Absolutely. So I can give you an example. I mean, the interesting thing is that there are, I'm sure people watching this are thinking of their own use cases. There are an infinite number of different ways that you can apply AI like this in your organization. So I'm going to give you an example of something which does have real world actual consequence on people's lives, and that's authorization of medical treatment. Now, this is an area that Rainbird is being used today. So you can imagine that decision actually being made on the basis of a whole bunch of different things. So you've probably got a decision model that needs to be made from process documents, from regulatory documents. Maybe you've got local policy, but you've certainly got maybe your physicians or your clinicians' expertise and all of their training, all of their human training that needs to go into building these models. Now, you can't start that kind of process, those kind of models, from data, not least because we've probably got rules or processes written down that we need to follow, but also we have to be able to explain why we're either approving or denying some medical treatment. We have to be able to explain that with complete transparency, because this matters for the human expert, the human who the decision is being made about. Now, we can use a large language model to help us take all of that body of expertise and all of that documentation and turn that into a transparent model that you can understand, that is open to your introspection, that your human experts, be that physicians, clinicians, whoever, are able to look at and identify, maybe look for and identify and remove bias, identify the way that this is working. Sometimes we call this global or macro explainability, this idea that you can look at these models and understand what they're doing. In fact, you don't need a big background in machine learning or statistics to be able to do that. Anybody can look at one of these Rainbird models and understand the basis on which it's going to be able to go and make its decisions. But then, of course, you're going to deploy these things and it's going to start making decisions in the real world. You'll go through a process of testing the model first and understanding how that works. I'll mention that a bit more in just a second. But then once it's really deployed, you want to get an explanation for every decision that it's made. So you not only understand the basis on which the model is making its decisions, you're also understanding the basis on which the model has made each specific decision, which we sometimes describe as local or micro explainability. So you've kind of got these two different sides to understanding the way that these models work. And you know what? There is no other sort of AI that can solve this kind of problem. This goes well beyond the kind of closed world of needing to explicitly encode everything that you have with symbolic AI, because it can go and leverage data as well. It can not only explain how it works, but it can also explain why it's made each particular decision, which is, as I said earlier on, an absolute superpower. Comes to life if you see it. So let me maybe take you through a specific example. So this is actually in US healthcare. So this is prior authorization of medical claims. It's an administrative process, but that also requires some clinical judgment to be able to go and make that decision. And it's a process that matters. PA decision making is a slow process. It has been traditionally pretty difficult to automate. And when things go wrong or it takes a long time, this results in delays in patient care. It has real impact on people's lives. Well, we've been able to demonstrate a marked improvement in processing time by being able to automate parts of this process. But also, certainly in the US, you can't approve or deny a PA without a physician making that judgment. But what we've been able to do, and I will show you this in action in just a second, is give the physician a report that says this is why we need to accept or deny this this PA, for the physician to finally go and sign off. So you have 100% of cases with a human expert being able to say, yes, that's right, let's carry on, with complete and utter transparency along the way. Transparency matters. It's absolutely critical in this kind of use case.
So in this case, you're augmenting the physician. You kind of, let's say, you're really helping the physician come to those decisions quicker by augmenting.
Absolutely, yes. So this sits alongside the physician in this case. Let's go. Let me show you a handful of screenshots of the of an application of this going through, because I want to show you a little kind of brief snapshot of the model that sits behind this. So the process for building this goes through a number of steps. You start with building. This is really about taking your documentation and your human expertise to build a Rainbird knowledge map. Go through a process of refining it with your human experts to validate that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, that your experts agree, and you can improve the process. We have a discrete testing framework that allows you to both protect the models that you build from regression, but also be able to demonstrate completeness and the accuracy of outcomes. And then you deploy these things, and we have a whole suite of model ops tools that allow you to do that. The reason I mention this here is that in this particular case, it was deployed and connected into UiPath. So I'm going to show you a little bit of UiPath as we go through. Now, incidentally, I'm not necessarily specifically picking on UiPath as the framework to do this. You can use this could be delivered over any kind of workflow tool or any other RPA vendor. Just happened to be UiPath in this particular case. So those of you that understand, have seen a bit of UiPath will recognize this as a relatively simple UiPath Forms application. So this is the user-facing application. Really what happens is it goes through a process of gathering data. Now, these data come from all kinds of different data sources. It might be that we're bringing in fax PA documents, we've got handwritten notes and so on. UiPath is doing what UiPath is really, really excellent at, which is getting all of these data from all of these different places and bringing them together. Once we've got all those data together through the UiPath process, we can pass it to Rainbird to go and get a decision. Now, in this particular case, Rainbird's come back with some questions, and you can see there are 4 questions on this screen here. Those have actually been generated by the Rainbird inference engine, asking the clinician some further questions that it needs in order to get a high quality answer. Of course, Rainbird can also be used without a human in the loop as straight through processing. And if your use case requires a decision over data, even in real time, Rainbird's able to cope with that. Once we've answered those questions, Rainbird gives its decision. In this particular case, we're saying we're rejecting and we're 100% certain. But that on its own is not enough, because it's absolutely critical that we understand why we've made that judgment. So we also are able to go and generate a summary report for the physician that says, here are all the different technical assessment that we've done. This is the clinical evaluation. This was all the factors that we considered. This was why we've looked at these factors. This was why we've looked at these other factors, and so on. So you've got absolute auditability and transparency, and also traceability. You can see where all the data came from in making that judgment. Now, let's just quickly show you, I won't linger on this for very long, but quickly show you behind the scenes here. If you're familiar with UiPath, you'll recognize a bit of UiPath process here. This is what drives the forms. The thing I really wanted to highlight was here is the interesting bit where actually the decision is being made. This is the point at which UiPath has gathered all of its information. You can see that this is linear. There's no branching decision logic here. We're just gathering the data and sending it to Rainbird for a decision. Sending it to Rainbird, what does that look like? Well, here is this is the knowledge map which is powering that decision. This has been built through a combination of documentation and refinement by human experts, and understands all of the key factors and everything that's important in making that prior authorization decision. But of course, because this model of expertise is separated from the process, there's this separation of concerns between decision and process, we're able to independently test and validate the Rainbird model at this point. So you can see here where I'm running through a test case in this model to see how well it's performing without a dependency on the backing RPA process or whatever channel this is going to be consumed over. You can see here I've got a rejection, and then the thing I'm interested in is understanding, okay, why? And Rainbird provides a tool called an evidence tree for every decision that's generated, which shows the complete chain of reasoning. And there's a tool there that lets you as an author go and explore that and understand the basis on which a decision was made. But of course, that can be turned into a plain English or natural language report for your end users, your consumers to go and look at, whether you're using our APIs, your existing report generation tools, or maybe you're using something like OpenAI's GPT APIs to go and do that work for you. So listen, I've waffled on for ages. Hopefully that's given you a little bit of a sense of the power of these technologies, particularly if you're sitting on Planet Process. Thank you so much for your patience. And as we went through, I think we've probably got a couple of minutes for some questions, if there's any questions that have bubbled up along the way, Sally.
Thank you for that, Ben. And I do have a few questions before I'll wait to see if the audience has any questions as well. The first question that came to mind is, you were putting documents into your first stage, which is it automatically reads those documents and procedures. How does that affect people in Planet Process, especially those who are looking to do process mining and things like that?
So I think the thing to understand about Rainbird is Rainbird is all about these models of knowledge. It's a structured model that sits at the heart of everything that we do. You can build those models by hand. We have a no-code environment that lets a human expert come and build one of these models, and that's really critical because it also means that you're able to go and modify and understand these models by hand. When I say they're open to introspection, it's entirely visual. It's there for you to look at. But of course, not every expert wants to sit and build these things by hand. Particularly, you've got a stack of process documents that describe your world and describe your decision. So you can pass those into Rainbird, and we use the astonishing power of large language models to, frankly, understand language, to extract one of these models into Rainbird for you to then go and modify and understand, which is very different from asking an LLM a question just off the bat, because you don't get the same kind of explainability. You can't see the model that sits behind the scenes and understand the basis on which it's making its decision. And we'll go into these steps in a lot more detail when we go into kind of dig into Neuro Symbolic AI in the next webinar.
Okay. And would you say that that process, because one of the things you pointed out was that process mining gets more and more complicated and more expensive as the process itself becomes complicated. Would you say that maybe with this, you're kind of helping people who are doing process mining to find easy ways to extract information, kind of like mind map what you're doing?
Yeah. So think about it like this. I think every complex process requires decision points along the way. When you come to that decision point, you're then going to need to try and mine and understand the basis on which those decisions are happening. And then very quickly you end up in this scaling challenge, and things get more and more complicated as you go. But imagine if you were able to actually take that decision process and automatically build these models that anybody can look at, that you can understand, and drop them into your process. Suddenly, actually, your task of process mining becomes vastly simpler.
Okay, and we talked about Neuro Symbolic. I know we're going to cover this, but that first section, again, when you're actually taking information, converting that into knowledge models, that's a huge step towards that Neuro Symbolic engine.
Absolutely, it is. So I think Symbolic AI is all about structured models of the world, such that we can come and ask questions of those models. But I described earlier, I think I used the term closed world. Symbolic AI suffers from what we might call the closed world assumption. You have to explicitly encode your world in order to be able to go and have a model that you can go and talk to. But by being able to use, in this particular case, our language engine to automatically build these models, starts to break down that closed world. It means that you can give these things your data and your documentation as the starting point for the models that you're building. So it changes the dynamic of the way that you're building that process. It's a huge step forwards.
Just one final question from my side, which is about the hype cycle in Gartner case study. There's lots of different technologies there. Are we seeing a coming together of different technologies? Because you talked about Neuro Symbolic, we talked about generative AI, but it looks like all of this are coming together in some kind of form or are they working with each other? Are we going to see a completely different map next year?
I think
a different hype cycle and different things on the hype cycle.
That's a very interesting question. It will be absolutely, first of all, fascinating to see whether generative AI this time next year is still sitting at the top of peak of inflated expectations. my personal expectation is that it probably will be. I think we are seeing a coming together of some of these technologies, and this is part of why I think Gartner put the kind of 10-year time frame on neurosymbolic AI. That's partly because that in itself is quite a broad term that covers lots of different technologies and really is some of the coming together of these technologies. For us, this is about decision intelligence, and decision intelligence is, we sometimes describe it as kind of the gravitational force that is bringing planet process and planet data crashing together. Although, of course, we must remember that all of the data that's generated on planet data was really the result of some process somewhere, whether explicitly defined or not. And so I think as we start to see some of these technologies come together, perhaps under the banner of neurosymbolic AI, the real thing is going to be where we've got tools like large language models. This is going to be about releasing the power of those large language models so that you can actually go and safely make use of those technologies in your enterprise. I think most people are starting to recognize that it's very difficult to go deploy ChatGPT or its ilk in any kind of enterprise setting. But by bringing together some of these other technologies, now you suddenly can.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite quotes from a prospective client was that ChatGPT is getting us about 70% accuracy, but it's unreliable, which I thought, kind of more combination of the two. Just a final question on decision intelligence, because that's, it's a term that's really catching up, but it's a term that's actually been around for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to maybe a short history on the whole idea of what decision intelligence is and what that means?
So I think for I'll answer that from a Rainbird perspective. I think for us,
absolutely.
Decision intelligence is about not marginalizing your experts in the way that you build these systems. We have suffered from, I think in James's webinar that preceded this one, he described it as a data fetish. We've suffered from maybe 2 decades of data fetish because of the promise of being able to build models directly from data. But that marginalizes human expertise, and it marginalizes explainability and the ability to go and take decisions and turn inputs into outcomes that you can actually go and take action on. And for us, decision intelligence is all about bringing together people and turning that into something that allows you to drive systems that give you actionable outcomes out of the other end. And that describe it as a superpower. It really is a superpower.
Going to see if there are any other questions. I think I just got one final one. Like, but it's, a lot of them are in, I forget the exact phrase they use, but kind of like in the nursery stage. They're just, most of it is in academia. It's not commercial. And Rainbow's been doing Symbolic for 10 years. And it sounds like, we are in pole position to probably be taking the entirety of Symbolic, because it's partly done already, but the whole engine that you showed earlier into commercial world over the next couple of months, 6 months timeframe. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. And I think one of the things that enables these technologies to really reach adoption is being able to interact with them and use them as non-experts, by which I mean you don't need a background in decision science or philosophy or linguistics or mathematics or data science in order to pick up Rainbird and start building models that actually have an impact that you can go deploy today that will start adding value to your processes and to your organization right away. And I think that is where breaking some of these tools out of academia has been very successful, because Rainbird is a no-code environment that anybody can pick up and anybody can go and use just off the shelf right away. That we have a fantastic Rainbird Academy training program which we take people through. You do not need a background in any of these technologies, software engineering or anything like that in order to go get started. Well, Ben, thank you for your time, and I look forward to our next webinar, which is Neuro Symbolic, and showing and actually showcasing the things that we're doing over here. So to everybody listening, it's in September. We'll confirm the dates closer to the time. Thank you again. Very good.